All right, guys. So on your screen is the Linoleum center design. And you've drawn this one as a sketch, but we're going to do it as a board drawing. I did not check your sketch for accuracy. So we need to talk about this a little bit because it's made to be tricky. We're given the overall dimensions and we're given dimensions in between, and we leave one out. So that's not the tricky part because you're supposed to. We leave one out because we don't want an accumulation of tolerances. And we'll talk about that a little more when we get to the dimensioning. But there are parts of the drawing, like these sides, these small ledges here that we do not have a dimension for, and we have to figure that out as we draw. So the overall width of this object is 8, and the overall height is 5.5. So if we look at this as far as the size of our paper, then we know that our paper is 8.5 by 11. So when we're doing our centering, we can't really choose a center line with diagonals because it is symmetrical, but it's not symmetrical with a primary center point like our last drawing. So if we want to get our drawing, and I'll just pretend like, this is our paper, and then our drawing will fit right in the middle of that paper, okay? And you've seen this before, but just to reiterate, so the drawing itself, 8 inches by 5.5 inches. And then our paper is 8.5 inches by 11 inches. Okay, so we're going to take 11 minus 8, which is 3. And remember, we want equal distance on this side and this side. If I kept the 3, the drawing would be over here on the side of the paper. We don't want that. We want to have 2 equal distances. So we're going to divide that by 2, which is 1.5. And that's how far we're going to go over. Okay, what we're doing is finding this start point. So that's how far we're going to go over. And then the distance that we go up to find that start point is going to be 8.5 minus 5.5, which also happens to be 3. And we'll divide that by 2, which also gives us 1.5. So on this drawing, we're going up 1.5 and over 1.5. So on your 16 scale, from the edge of your paper, measure over 1.5 and up 1.5 to get our start point. And remember, we're not doing that all the way around the corners. We wouldn't want to go 1.5 over and down on each corner. We just want that one start point, because all this does is center your drawing. We don't really care. I mean, we do care that the drawing is centered, but we would rather be off on the accuracy of the centering than the drawing itself. And a lot of times, if you go in on all corners, the accuracy of the overall drawing is not correct. So let's just get that one start point and then measure from there. So go ahead and do that. I'm going to erase what I've got here so I can do that as well. We're using our 16 scale. And remember, 16 scale, 1 inch is divided into 16ths. So each one of those little marks is a 16th, a 1/8, 3/16. That would be 2/8 or 4/16, or what we would reduce down to 1/4. So the big mark is a half. The next biggest mark are the 4th marks. The next is the 8th marks. And then the very tiny marks are the 16 marks. So I'm zoomed out. You can see my start point here. Now for this object, it's rectangular. So once we get that start point, we can just use our straight edge. Let's go ahead and just draw. We call these projection lines, and these are serving as construction lines for our entire object. So they're going to be very, very light. And we can go back in and darken them in. But for now, we're going to use our straight edge. We went over 1.5 and up 1.5. Over 1.5 and up 1.5 from the edge of your paper. And then all I did is line my straight edge, my horizontal straight edge, up with my start point, and I made a line. I haven't measured anything yet on that line. And now I'm lining up my vertical straight edge, and I'm just making a vertical construction line. So I haven't really measured anything because I want to measure along those straight lines, so I know that my measurements are going to be consistent and straight. If we just put our scale on the dot, our scale could actually be rotated this way or this way, and we don't get an accurate measurement. So we want to measure along something that's straight. We could put our straight edge from our mechanical arm up there and measure along it, but it's much easier. You draw a line, put your scale up to it, and that distance, that width of the object was 8. And remember, single view drawings, all we see is width and height. And then the depth is given as a note. So we have 8 inches across here. And then our height was 5.5. So all I'm doing is putting my straight edge up to my line, measuring 5.5. Okay, so I have my 8 mark here, my 5.5 mark here. Now I'll use my straight edge at those marks, and we're going to just box in our drawing. So I have my rectangle. That rectangle is equal to the outer dimensions of my drawing. And you don't need to write it on here, but I'm going to for your sake. This was the 8-inch side. And then this was the 5.5-inch side. And we have the outermost corners of our object here. So anything extra, I can go ahead and erase if I want to. You're going to do cleanup at the end of your drawing. So if you wanted to wait till then, that's fine too. But if it helps you to get rid of stray lines as you go, that's perfectly acceptable as well. So far we went over 1.5, up 1.5. We found our start point. From our start point, we measured over 8 inches. We measured up 5.5 inches, and we made the outermost rectangle for our object. If we toggle back over to the object, we can see that some of these dimensions are labeled here. So we talked about going ahead and drawing what we have with our dimensions and then figuring out the sizes of things that are not dimensioned. Okay, so we're given everything that we need. We just have to figure out some of the other dimensions. And there's a reason why we leave dimensions off. ANSI standard says that you only dimension an object in one way, and that's a way that it can be easily interpreted and not misrepresented. So if we put too many dimensions on an object, then it could be misrepresented when we're adding tolerances to an object. So like I said, we'll talk about that more in dimensioning chapters. But to start this, we'll just go over, we'll follow the dimensions here. We'll go over 2.5. We'll put another half mark for that space, another 2, and then another half mark. Okay, so we'll just do our dimensions along this horizontal line. So 2.5, 1/2, 2, and another half. So just along the top or the bottom, either one, it's going to be the same on both sides. That first dimension was 2.5. And I'm just putting little marks. And then I'm going to go a 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to go another 2. And then another 1/2 inch. And you can see my marks up here. So just for your sake, I'm going to put the dimensions on here. This was 2.5. This was 1/2. This was 2. And that little space was a 1/2. So for now, we just have our marks. We're not going to do any lines just yet. We'll go ahead and put the marks that we can put on the right side. So if we toggle back over to our drawing, we have 1.5, half, 1.5, and another half. So 1.5, half, 1.5, another half. And we'll just go down the right side of the object, just like our dimensions are here. If you follow your dimensions, it's a lot easier when you draw. So wherever the dimensions are coming from, whether it's a center point or a side, the first thing you do is follow those dimensions, and then you figure out the others as you go. So again, 1.5, half, 1.5, and a half. So we'll toggle back over to the drawing using the 16 scale. This first one was 1.5, and we had a 1/2 inch space. And then we had another 1.5 and another 1/2 inch space. So I haven't really drawn anything yet. All I've done is put my little measurement marks on there. And again, you don't have to put the dimensions on here. We're not going to dimension this. I'm putting those numbers on there for your benefit. But once we have those measurement marks, we know it's going to be the same on both sides. So we can just very easily use our instrument and make some projection lines. So I'm just putting my straight edge up to this first mark here, my first measurement mark. And that line doesn't go all the way across, but it does go out, probably a third of the way. So I'm just kind of estimating right now. And since it's going to be in line on the other side, before I move my straight edge, I'm going to go ahead and do that same line on the other side. So I don't have to measure twice. So what it's going to look like is just 2 lines. I lined it up with my measurement point. I made that straight line, and then I went ahead and made this line. Now, I don't know how long this line is yet. We haven't measured it. I knew it didn't go all the way across the object, but I knew we needed about a third of the way over. So right now it's just a straight line. We'll go back and put some measurements to it and trim it out like we need to. And we're going to do that on the next measurement mark as well. So about a third on either side. So now this is what it's going to look like. And then we have 2 more measurement marks on this vertical line. We're going to do the same thing. And that 1/2 inch is for the space in between the designs. And you'll notice when we go back to the drawing that that 1/2 inch is uniform all the way around. So that space is always a 1/2 inch, which is a clear indicator on what the other dimensions need to be. So my paper looks something like this. Again, we'll go back and put dimensions on these lines, but for now, we just projected that measurement over. So we call these projection lines because we only had to measure once. So that helps us in efficiency. We'll do the same thing with our vertical straight edge. So I'm going to put it up against my horizontal straight edge, keep it flush. And I'm just using my triangle as a straight edge to make the vertical lines. I know I don't need to go all the way down, but I do need that on both sides. I'm going to move this down just a little bit so I can put it at the bottom. So at each one of those marks, I'm making some shorter lines that I can go back and put some measurements to. And just a reminder, these are light. These are your construction lines. So some of them are going to be erased. But when you're cleaning up your drawings, that's when you go back and darken everything in. I accidentally put an extra line there in the middle. It's okay. So I have something like this. It gives me my spaces. It starts me out. And now I'll go back and put the details in and get the right dimensions for those lines. And I'll give you guys a couple minutes to get up to speed with me. Does anybody need help? So if I look back at the object, I know I've got my 2.5 mark, so that's already measured. I know this bottom part is 1 inch. So I can go in 1 inch, and that's going to give me the ability to create this kind of L shaped on the side. Now, the one dimension we don't have is the dimension where my cursor is. So if you can see my cursor circling, we don't have that dimension, but we do have this 5/8 dimension down here. So if we want to say that this is uniform 1/2 inch all the way across, then we know that this line that we said we didn't have a dimension for, it has to mirror the dimension that we have over here. So this 5/8 indicates that this has to be 5/8 as well, only because our space is a continuous 1/2 inch. So if we didn't make our space a continuous 1/2 inch, then that could vary, but we know that that space is continuous 1/2 inch. So therefore, this part has to be 5/8 as well. Okay, so we'll go in from the side 1 inch. We'll go up 5/8 of an inch, and then whatever's left over, we'll just go into the lines that we already have. So we're going to make these little L shapes on the corners. And from there, we'll basically have all that we need to make the inside. So I'll show you what I mean. We'll toggle back over to our drawing. So if we follow our dimensions, the first one was on this upper right corner. So I'm going to just measure along the line that I need here. I'm going to measure over 1 inch because that was a given dimension. Okay, so here's my 1 inch point right here. And then I can go ahead and make a vertical line from that point. We know that that vertical line is not going to be very tall there. It's going to be 5/8 of an inch, but I'm just going to go ahead and measure it. I mean, not measure, but draw it about that much. Then I can put my scale up to it and make sure I'm getting actual 5/8 of an inch because I'm measuring along a straight line. If I tried to measure it without putting it up to a straight line, my scale could turn and I could actually have a different size than what I need. So remember, we're going up 5/8 of an inch. We've got 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, and 5/8. So it's the 1/8 mark past the half mark if we're looking at our scale. So I'm going to put just a little measurement mark right there at the 5/8. And then I can take my straight edge, and I know that from here, it's going to go out to this edge. So, you know, after I make this line, I pretty much have everything I need for those corner pieces. So let me show you some efficiency. We didn't do this with the vertical line, but since I have it lined up right here already, and I know I'm going to need it on this side, you know, let's just go ahead and make a line on this side. We don't have the exact measurement, but we know that it's in line with the one that we have. So now we don't have to measure twice over here. We already have the 5/8. We just have to measure 1 from the side. So anything that's symmetrical that we need in the either the top and the bottom or the right or the left side, we can do those, you know, at the same time. We can make those marks at the same time. So the only thing I need on this side is to measure over 1 from here. And that gives me the spot where I need to make my vertical line. So this time, since I'm in the know, I'm going to need it down here as well. I've got it measured and lined up. So I'll go ahead and make the line that I actually measured for, that I know that I'm going to need that same line down here. I don't know exactly how long I'm making it, but I know that I need a line. So I just went ahead and made it in the same spot below. So if we trim out, just so you can see it here, and I use the word trim because that's what we would use in AutoCAD. In this drawing, we're actually erasing because it's a board drawing. But we're trimming up our lines by erasing them down. So this is what it would actually look like with those finished corners. Okay. So here's a finished corner. Here's a finished corner. So I have my 1 inch mark on the bottom. I need my 5/8 mark. So I'm measuring for that 5/8 again, just like I measured here for the 5/8. And I'll go ahead and put 5/8 right there and 1 inch right here. So you can remember those measurements if you're still working on it. I'm going to measure 5/8 on this line because it is basically the same line as what we did in the top. Once you get your 5/8 measurement mark, it's your straight edge, your horizontal straight edge. From there, you'll go out to the lines that we already have. And I can go ahead and put that line on the other side. I really didn't need it all the way over. So I made my line here, and I made this line simultaneously, so I didn't have to measure twice. I've already done the vertical measurement here. I already measured 1 inch over. So I can line my straight edge up, even though I didn't make that line to start out with. I can line my straight edge up with it, so I don't have to measure again. And that gives me this line here, that 1 inch over. I didn't have to put a measurement mark because I already had it. I just lined my straight edge up with that same line. So I can clean up the corners a little bit. So now that I have my corners, I can work off of those to get the rest of it. Because I'm not given any additional dimensions other than what I've got on my paper already. So I'm working off of the dimensions I have to complete that inside structure. So I told you the key was that this 1/2 inch space is going to stay uniform all the way around. Well, we have it here and we have it here, but we still need to do a 1/2 inch here. So with our 16 scale, we'll just start in this corner that we started in originally. We're going to measure down about a 1/2 inch. So try to get it as close to a vertical line as you can, so you're not off in your measurement. A 1/2 inch is just slightly smaller than this 5/8 of an inch line. So 1/2 inch is going to be right about there if you're coming down. And if we measure over a 1/2 inch along that horizontal line, it's going to be right about here. So I tried to get it as close to the line as possible just to keep my scale straight. So here's my 1/2 inch from this vertical line over, and then my 1/2 inch from that horizontal line down. What that does, it gives us that space in between. So I can take my straight edge, line it up here. And we know that this line is going to end up touching our vertical line that we already have. So I'm not making it all the way over here because I know my space goes like a zigzag down. So I just made it over far enough. I will know the actual point when I make this vertical line right here. So I could be efficient and put it on the other side, but I want to show you the finished product before I put too many lines on the paper and you get confused. So I'm lining my vertical straight edge up with that other 1/2 inch mark. And that line is actually only needed right here. So what happens here, we're going to end up erasing some of these lines that we made earlier. Okay, so now we have the corner part where we can erase it. And then we have this uniform 1/2 inch space all the way through. So we'll erase out in the space the lines that we don't need. So we can see that we are true to our 1/2 inch. We can go ahead, even right here on the side, we can erase out there. So now we actually have our object. We just got to reproduce that all the way around. So the top part's going to be fairly simple because we already have our lines to line up to. So I'm just putting my straight edge right back flush with the line that I've already made, because I don't want to have to measure twice if I don't have to. I'm doing it the most efficient way. And then I know I'm going to have a space here, so I'm just going to estimate. If you have a scale on your straight edge, you're going to get a good estimate. If you don't, you can kind of just eyeball a 1/2 inch for now. And if you need to make it out longer, you can, or if you need to trim some, you can. So I have my line coming over from here. I do need to measure one time for my 1/2 inch away from the edge. So I'll just line it up with the line that I already have. I'll see that, okay, this is actually the 1/2 inch mark. So I was close. And then I'll put my straight edge in line with that mark. I'll bring that down. So again, I have my 1/2 inch space. I just erase what I don't need of those earlier construction lines. All right, and to finish it, of course, we would duplicate this on the bottom. We're actually running out of time today, so let's stop where we are.